Hi, my name's Adeline, and if you've ever been betrayed by the people who raised you, not lied to by strangers, but erased by your own mother, in a courtroom, then maybe you'll understand why I didn't flinch when she slapped me, because by then, she'd already taken everything else. They forged my name, they sold the house I was promised, and they made sure the whole town stayed quiet. But what they didn't know was that Grandpa left me the truth, and I'm done hiding it. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Because by the end, you might wonder, what would your family do if you were the only one holding the truth they buried for decades? The air outside the Cook County Courthouse carried that early spring bite, cold enough to make your teeth ache, but not enough to keep people from pretending winter had passed. I stood alone near the concrete steps, a stained envelope folded in half and tucked into my coat pocket like a secret. I hadn't seen my parents in weeks. Not since the last dinner where my mother asked if I'd finally decided to do something respectable. I didn't even know about today's hearing until a probate notice showed up in my old email inbox, forwarded by mistake. I was never meant to know. I walked through the heavy glass doors with that in mind. Every step on the courthouse floor echoed louder than it should have. I took a seat on the far right, near the back, far enough to disappear but close enough to hear, and then they walked in like it was a fashion show. Seraphine, heels clicking like gunshots, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. My mother in her usual navy blazer, the one she wore to church and to funerals. And my father, always trailing behind, stiff like a statue carved out of silence. None of them looked my way. Not even once. Judge Howard Lasker cleared his throat and called the hearing to order. He was the kind of man you'd trust to settle a neighborhood feud. Measured, quiet, probably drank black coffee with no sugar. When the will was read, I expected nothing. What I didn't expect was my name. Not as a beneficiary, not even a footnote. Just as a witness. Then came the page, the one that made my palms go cold. This document includes the signature of Adeline Reyes as verification, the clerk said. I felt the blood rush out of my face. I didn't sign anything. The judge looked at me. Miss Reyes, is this your signature? My voice trembled before my lips parted. No, sir, it's not. My mother let out a sharp breath through her nose. Oh, stop it, she snapped. I never signed it, I said again, louder this time. The room shifted. Quiet, heavy, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something. And then, she did it. Her palm cracked across my cheek with such force I heard the gasp ripple across the courtroom. My mother, right there, in front of the judge, the lawyers, the clerk, the strangers watching like they were seeing a scene from a TV show. You don't get to ruin this, she hissed. My father stood. Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. Seraphine leaned over with that glassy smile of hers and whispered, You always ruin everything. Even now. I didn't respond. Couldn't. The judge banged his gavel once and announced a brief recess. I rose slowly. My cheek burned. But it wasn't the slap. It was everything behind it. The years of being the one they never introduced at parties. The one who stayed quiet at the dinner table. The one who paid rent early and brought her own folding chair to holidays. Just in case. They'd buried me long before this. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the wind had picked up, colder now. I stuffed my hands into my coat pocket and felt it. Metal, small, familiar. The old hair clip, the one Grandpa gave me on my 15th birthday. I hadn't worn it in years, but somehow I couldn't let it go. I gripped it until my knuckles went white. I stood there, cheek burning, not from the slap, but from the truth no one else seemed ready to face. I didn't remember leaving the courthouse, only that I walked, past the pigeons clustered on the steps, past a woman yelling into her phone, past a little boy holding his father's hand while swinging a toy gavel. By the time I made it to my third-floor walk-up in Pilsen, the sky had dulled to that familiar gray Chicago hue, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it already was. I dropped my bag on the floor, towed off my shoes, and didn't bother turning on the lights. Just the soft hum of the fridge greeted me. No calls, no texts, no apologies. I leaned against the kitchen counter for a long minute, then made my way to the bathroom. In the mirror, I looked older, tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. My cheek was still slightly red, but it was the look in my eyes that stopped me. Not pain, not even anger yet. Just the deep ache of knowing you never really belonged where you thought you did. I set the hair clip on the sink. The silver had dulled with time, but I could still see the tiny engraving on the inside, a tiny etching of the number 12. Grandpa had once told me that was my lucky year, said I'd done more helping on the farm that summer than any adult. I blinked, and suddenly I was back on his porch. I must have been 15. We were sitting on the old swing that creaked like a tired dog every time we moved. He had a paper napkin folded twice in his hand. "I don't have much for girls," he'd said, but I figured every young woman deserves something shiny now and then. Inside the napkin was that very clip. Just simple silver, smooth edges, a clasp that clicked into place with confidence. "Someday," he said, squinting out at the cornfields, "they'll forget what you've done. But not me. This says I remember." Then he looked at me, real serious. "And when I'm gone, don't let 'em push you out. That house, it's yours. Not 'cause you're the baby, not 'cause I pity you, but because you earned it. Every nail, every box of nails you held while I fixed the roof, every pie you helped bake, even if the crusts were lousy. You earned it." It was the only time he'd ever said anything like that. Grandpa wasn't a man of sentiment, but he never broke a promise. A knock pulled me back to the present. I peeked through the peephole. Mr. Arevalo, Grandpa's next-door neighbor for over 30 years. I opened the door slowly. "Evening, Adeline," he said with that raspy voice of his. "Didn't want to call. Figured I'd just come by." He held out a small tin of conchas, my favorite, pink sugar crust still flaky, and a worn manila envelope. "You want to come in?" I asked, stepping aside. "I'll just stay a minute," he said, but he eased into the chair like his bones had been waiting for that cushion all day. He handed me the envelope. "Your grandfather gave this to me, told me to hold on to it, said if things ever got messy, I'd know when to pass it along." I sat down across from him, tin unopened. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled out the letter. It was dated just 6 weeks before he passed. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Curled letters, uneven lines, but steady. "Odalyn, if this is in your hands, it means they did what I was afraid they might. I want you to know, I changed the will. The house is yours. I filed it with my attorney. You'll find the paperwork under the drawer in the study, where we kept the old farm ledgers. They may try to say otherwise, but don't let them. You earned this. You stayed. You showed up. That counts for something. Don't let their noise drown out the truth. Grandpa." I swallowed hard. Mr. Arevalo was watching me gently, like he wasn't sure if he should speak or just let the words hang there. "Thank you," I said softly. I didn't know I always hoped he saw what I tried to do. "He did." Mr. Arevalo nodded. "He told me all the time. Called you the quiet backbone. Said you held more weight than the rest of them combined." He patted his knees, then stood. "I'll leave you to it, but if you need help, you knock." When the door shut, the silence returned. But it didn't feel so empty anymore. I turned to my bookshelf, pulled out a small box where I kept old paperwork. Tucked between receipts and expired coupons was a Target return slip, dated 6 months before Grandpa passed. It had my full signature, and the middle initial, Odalyn J. Reyes. The court document from this morning, it said, Odalyn T. Reyes. T. For nothing. I've never used a T in my life. I dug through my drawers, found more documents, bank statements, my college ID, a notarized lease agreement, all with the same signature. J. They didn't even try that hard. I sat at the kitchen table, spread the documents out. The more I looked, the more I realized whoever forged my name didn't know me at all. Not even enough to get the smallest detail right, and yet they had the gall to erase me. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding, not from panic this time, but from a slow, deliberate fire rising in my chest. If they wanted to use my name. I pulled the hair clip off the sink, twisted it into place. I'll remind them who I am. They stole my name to erase me, but they forgot I was the one Grandpa trusted most. I didn't sleep much after Mr. Arevalo left. Every time I shut my eyes, that notary stamp flickered in my mind, hovering like a cheap tattoo stamped on a lie. By morning, I'd already dressed, packed the folder with Grandpa's letter, and circled the kitchen twice before realizing I was waiting for something that wouldn't come. An apology. A message? Even a pitiful, "We didn't mean for it to get that far." But silence has a tone when it comes from your own family. It doesn't sound empty. It sounds final. The Cook County Probate Office was across from an elementary school, which made parking a pain. I found a tight spot on 18th and walked the 2 blocks, each step heavier than the last. Not from doubt, but from the weight of finally deciding I wasn't going to let them decide who I was. The lobby inside buzzed with fluorescent lights and old carpet. I approached the front desk, holding my folder like a shield. "Hi," I said, offering a small smile to the middle-aged man behind the plexiglass partition. His name tag read, Clerk Morrison. "I'm looking to access the probate file of Thomas Reyes," I said. "He passed earlier this year. I believe it's public now." He gave me a slow once-over, like he was deciding if I had the right to be asking. "You a relative?" he asked. "Granddaughter," I said. "But I'm not listed as a beneficiary. Just need to view the record." He tapped a few keys, then glanced at me again. "All right. Just viewing. No copies." I nodded. "That's fine." He disappeared into a back room. When he returned, he slid a slim manila folder through the slot under the glass. "Don't take it apart." I sat at the viewing desk near the window. Pages crackled under my fingers, court petitions, filing dates, witness lists. And then the will. There it was again. My name. Odalyn T. Reyes. The forged version, sloppy as ever. No one who knew me would have made that mistake. My middle name's Juliana. Always has been. I never once used a T in anything official, but it wasn't that detail that made my stomach drop. It was the notary stamp. April 14th, 3 weeks after Grandpa's funeral. My mouth went dry. They didn't just forge my name, they signed for a dead man. They made him complicit in the theft of his own legacy. I sat back, forcing air through my nose. The file trembled in my hands. Clerk Morrison glanced over from behind the glass, probably thinking I was about to cry. I didn't. I just closed the folder, slid it back, and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded but didn't speak. Maybe he saw something in my face that told him it was better not to. Outside, the wind cut sharper than usual. Chicago spring still wore its winter clothes. I zipped my jacket and walked 3 blocks toward a diner I used to go to with coworkers. It was quiet, tucked behind a laundromat, with chipped booths and waitresses who remembered your name if you tipped well. I slid into a corner booth. A waitress approached, her ponytail pulled through a Cubs cap. "Odalyn? Is that you?" I looked up. Gwen. We'd gone to high school together, same history class. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. "Hey, Gwen," I said, offering a tired smile. She grinned and held up a finger. "Be right back." She returned with coffee before I even ordered. "Saw the video," she said, lowering her voice. "Didn't want to say anything, but that slap, that wasn't just about the will." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Gwen shrugged, pouring cream into a paper cup for another table. "I remember your mom, your sister. They always needed someone to pin things on. Quiet girl, keeps her head down, makes a perfect scapegoat." I didn't respond right away. Then Gwen added, "That slap was to remind everyone who they think you are, the one who keeps quiet, the one who backs down." I stirred my coffee. "Then it's time I remind them who I really am." She nodded. "You still wear your hair clipped back like before." I smiled faintly. "Not always. Just lately." We didn't talk much more. I finished half a sandwich I didn't taste and folded the receipt as I slid out of the booth. "Wait," Gwen called from the counter. She jogged over and handed me my check, wrapped in a folded paper napkin. The same way Grandpa used to wrap things when he didn't have a gift box. Simple. Intentional. I stared at it for a second too long. "Hope things work out," she said gently. I tucked the napkin into my jacket pocket, not because I needed it, but because some symbols don't belong to the past, they belong to the fight ahead. They erased his name, forged mine, and used the silence to cover their guilt. But I'm done being silent. The sky had gone slate gray by the time I reached the house. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the driveway I once used to ride my bike down, barefoot, laughing. Now I stood at the base of the porch steps, not as a daughter coming home, but as someone coming to reclaim what had been stolen. I could see the warm glow from the living room window, silhouettes moving past like ghosts. I took the folded napkin from my pocket and slid it into my coat, then knocked. Once, firm and clear. It didn't take long. My father opened the door, jaw clenched, eyes already narrowed like he was expecting a solicitor or a mistake. When he saw me, his lips thinned. "You have nerve showing up here." I didn't flinch. "You have nerve pretending I don't exist." He stepped aside just enough to make it clear I wasn't welcome, but he wasn't going to slam the door, yet. Inside, Elowen leaned against the archway, arms folded, glass of red wine in hand. Her nails were perfectly done, her smile even more so. "You should be grateful we didn't press charges," my father said flatly. I met his eyes. "You should be worried I haven't." Elowen scoffed. "Oh, come on. You think throwing around threats makes you look strong? It just makes you look pathetic." I stepped further in. "No. Pathetic is forging a dead man's signature and filing it with the court like no one would notice." My father's expression didn't move, but Elowen's fingers tensed around her wineglass. "You've got nothing," she said too fast. "Whatever theory you've cooked up, no one's going to believe it." "I don't have theories," I said. "I have timestamps. I have probate records. I have a notary stamp dated 3 weeks after Grandpa died. That did it." Elowen turned sharply toward my father. He didn't look at her. Instead, he glanced toward the front porch window, where a shadow shifted just behind the curtains. Mrs. Dalton, their nosy neighbor, always tended her porch plants at this hour. Tonight she was probably listening through the rhododendrons. I stepped into the middle of the living room. Everything was as it used to be. Same throw blanket, same coasters with the Reyes monogram, but it didn't feel like home, not anymore. "You used my name," I said calmly. "You used his, too, and you did it thinking no one would call you out." Elowen opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "I've already spoken to someone," I said, looking pointedly toward the front window. "They've seen what I've seen. You're just hoping they stay quiet." A muscle jumped in my father's jaw. Elowen's wineglass hovered mid-air like she'd forgotten what to do with it. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," he muttered. "Don't I?" I said. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the ones in trouble." He stepped forward. "Watch your tone." "You should watch your actions," I said. I pulled the folder from my coat, set it gently on the coffee table like a final offer. "You have 2 choices. Return what isn't yours, or I see you in court. And next time, the judge won't just be watching a slap. He'll be signing an arrest warrant." Silence. It stretched long and stiff, filling the room like thick smoke. Elowen finally spoke, voice cold. "You're just bitter he didn't leave it to you." "He did," I said. "He just made the mistake of trusting you'd honor that." She laughed once, short and sharp. "You think anyone's going to take your word over mine?" "No," I said, reaching into my coat one last time. "But they'll take his." I pulled the folded napkin from my pocket, walked to the coffee table, placed it on top of the folder, the same way Grandpa used to hand me birthday wishes or handwritten advice, always wrapped, always meaningful. "Elowen," I said softly, "he used to write blessings on these." She stared at it, suddenly unsure. "Let's see what you write," I added, "when the blessings run out." I turned and walked out. The air outside hit different this time. Not colder, just clearer, like I'd walked through the fire and found the path waiting on the other side. By the time I walked up the narrow stairwell to my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off. My shoulders ached from holding them high, spine locked in that defensive posture I learned too young and wore too long. I shut the door behind me and let the darkness hang for a beat before flipping the switch. The room was quiet, too quiet. No echo of voices, no footsteps overhead, just the hum of the old fridge and a draft slipping through the cracked window above the sink. I tossed my coat onto the chair, the napkin crumpled in its pocket. The folder was still tucked under my arm. I laid it on the kitchen table next to my scattered documents and unpaid bills. Paperwork spanned half the surface. Court notices, bank statements, old tax returns. It looked like a war table, and maybe that's exactly what it was. In the bathroom, I stared into the mirror. The slap mark had faded, but not completely. A faint pink outline still curved across my cheekbone like a bruise shaped by memory more than skin. I wiped the rest of the foundation off slowly, layer by layer, as if removing it could make the day disappear too. I sat on the edge of the tub and let it all catch up to me. The lies, the forged papers, my mother's hand, Elowen's smirk, my father's silence. It was like my family had gathered every ache I'd ever swallowed and turned them into ammunition. Tears came, not in a torrent, not sobs, just a quiet sting, like something finally giving way after being braced for too long. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I cried because I was tired of being strong when no one else ever had to be. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but when I got up, the hallway outside was dark. The city outside had settled into its own late-night rhythm. I boiled water for tea but didn't drink it. Instead, I sat on the couch and pulled an old shoebox from under the coffee table. Inside were newspaper clippings, report cards, a few faded photos, and a birthday card from Grandpa written in blocky blue ink. There was one photo I'd always kept close. Me, age 10, sitting beside him on the porch. My head leaned against his shoulder and he was mid-laugh. I could almost hear it again, low and rich, like a comforting echo, and just like that, the memory arrived. We were sitting together, that same porch, a fall afternoon when the cornfields behind his house still glowed gold. He was reading an article aloud about some crooked politician, laughing at how stupid people could be when they thought no one was watching. Then he looked at me and said, "You've got a mind like a blade, Odie. Sharp, but it's no use sheathed your whole life. Use it when no one else will fight fair." I hadn't thought of that day in years, but now I felt it. His voice wrapping around me like armor. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. At first, I ignored it. Then I saw the name. Aunt Marcia. I hadn't heard from her since the funeral. She'd left the family years ago after some silent rift, one of those long-held grudges people stop explaining because it's easier than naming who really caused the hurt. I picked up. "Odalyn." Her voice came through like gravel and warmth. I watched the hearing. I swallowed hard. "Then you know." "I knew before they ever filed," she said. "You were never the favorite, but you were always the spine." I exhaled slowly, unsure whether it was relief or heartbreak. "I inherited a drawer," she continued. "One your grandfather didn't want them rifling through. I found something, a signed trust draft. Dated, witnessed, with your name where it should be." My pulse stopped. "What?" "I'm sending you the scanned copy. I figured it might come to this. He didn't want lawyers. He just thought they'd honor it." "Well," I said quietly, "they didn't." She paused. "Odie, you're the last one who remembers what he wanted. Make them listen." We talked a little more, mostly in silence. Then I hung up. I opened my email. There it was. A scan, grainy but clear. His writing, his initials, his full signature. My name. Not as a witness, as the inheritor. Outside, muffled voices trickled through the vents. A teenager's voice, thick with frustration and something deeper. I recognized it. Amelia, the girl down the hall. Her mother had remarried last year, and ever since I'd noticed Amelia staying out later, walking slower when coming home. I opened my door. She sat slumped against the stairwell wall, hoodie pulled over her head, eyes rimmed red. "You okay?" I asked gently. She didn't answer at first. Then she sniffed and wiped her nose on her sleeve. My mom says I ruined everything, says if I'd kept my mouth shut, he wouldn't have left. My chest ached. I didn't say anything, she added, voice cracking. I didn't tell anyone. I sat beside her on the cold step, hands folded in my lap. Sometimes silence lets them win, I said. I learned that the hard way. She turned to look at me, searching my face for something, proof, maybe, that I meant it. You think people actually change? She asked. No, I said, but sometimes we do, and that changes everything. We sat there a while longer. When I went back inside, I didn't feel entirely alone. I lit a candle, taped the printed scan of Grandpa's trust above my desk, and underneath it I wrote in black ink, "He trusted me to carry the truth." Then I paused. So why am I still letting them speak over it? I didn't sleep much the night after Aunt Marcia sent me the trust document. I kept replaying every conversation, every side glance from Celine, every silence from my father, the kind that hides more than words ever could. By morning, I was dressed in dark slacks and a navy cardigan, hair pulled back, not out of vanity, but control. I tucked the original trust draft into a plastic sleeve, slid it into a manila folder, and left my apartment with purpose. I didn't bring a smile. I didn't need one. The Cook County Courthouse sat squat and gray beneath a sky smeared with clouds. Inside, I found the public records room quiet, almost reverent, the scent of dust and ink filling the air like it belonged to a different decade. Behind the glass window sat Miriam, silver hair in a soft twist, thick glasses perched halfway down her nose. She'd known me since I was 12. I used to sit outside her office while Grandpa handled county permits for his property. She looked up, blinked once, then leaned forward. "Odalyn," she said slowly. "You all right?" I offered a faint nod. "I need to compare 2 documents. It's important." She led me to a small back table behind the front kiosk, the kind where clerks do deeper file pulls. As she fetched Grandpa's will from the system's archive, I carefully unzipped my folder and laid out the version Marcia had found. 10 minutes later, she returned, handed me a thin file with an odd weight to it. I opened it and froze. The signature line. It had Grandpa's name, but his middle initial was wrong. More than that, his handwriting didn't match. I could spot the difference from across the table. My grandfather's penmanship had always slanted upward, even in his final years. The signature here dragged downward, flat and mechanical. And then, the notary stamp. That was the dagger. Dated 2 weeks after he died. Miriam sucked in her breath. "Oh, Lord." She pulled the file closer, checked the metadata printout. This was uploaded through the registrar's back channel, not the regular submission queue, she said quietly. Which means, someone inside, I finished for her. Miriam looked at me. Really looked. If this gets out, your family won't be the only ones panicking. This kind of backdoor edit, it doesn't just happen. I nodded once. My fingers curled tighter around the plastic sleeve with the real trust. They forged his name, I said under my breath. They erased his wishes. And yours, she added. Don't let them. I left the courthouse mid-morning, the chill in the air doing little to clear the weight pressing on my chest. By noon, I was home again. I locked the door, double-checked it, then placed both documents side by side on the kitchen table. That's when I heard the key turn. I stood still. 1 second. 2. The door creaked open, and in stepped Celine. She didn't say hello, just dropped her designer tote on my entry bench and let herself in like she owned the place. My stomach turned. She looked around, eyes narrowing at the scattered documents. You still living in this shoebox? You still breaking into places that don't belong to you? I asked. She walked to the table, then paused at the documents. I'm here to save you from yourself. No, I said. You're here because you're scared. Celine crossed her arms. You really think anyone's going to believe some dusty draft from a disgruntled aunt? The court already processed the will. I stepped forward, steady. I've compared metadata. I've spoken to Miriam. The notary dates after he died. Selene flinched, just slightly, but enough. Then she smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. You don't want to dig deeper, Odie? If you go down this road, don't expect the family to come with you. They were never with me, I said. She tilted her head. You always were unstable. Grandpa said it himself. You were too emotional to be trusted with anything serious. I didn't blink. Then why was he whispering my name at the hospice? I asked, when he thought no one could hear. Silence. Selene shifted her weight, dropped her eyes for a second, then turned and walked toward the door without another word. The click of it closing behind her wasn't final. It was a threat wrapped in silk. I sat down. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury I was learning how to hold. As daylight faded, I moved through the apartment like a ghost, folding laundry, watering a plant that hadn't bloomed in months, checking emails, and then I saw it, taped to my front door, white paper, red stamp header. Cease and desist. Intent to pursue legal action, filed under the name Nolan Reyes. No lawyer name, no letterhead, no official seal. It was a bluff, a fake. I peeled it off, shut the door, and leaned against it. They were willing to forge documents, willing to fabricate legal threats, and still, they underestimated me. I walked to the living room, turned on the desk lamp, and picked up the real trust draft. My thumb brushed over the ink, over my name written in Grandpa's hand. You can threaten me with silence, I said aloud, voice low, but you forgot. I know where the real record lives. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the door when someone knocked at noon. I didn't touch the toast I made at breakfast. I simply packed everything I had, Marcia's documents, the forged ones, Grandpa's scribbled notes, and headed to the place that had always held the quiet truth, the public library archive on Halsted. The walk gave me space. Wind brushed through my sleeves, not as a chill, but a reminder. I was moving forward. The archive room was cold, quiet, and overlooked, the perfect place to be forgotten, which is probably why Grandpa used it so often. I remembered coming here as a teenager, watching him flip through zoning ledgers with his glasses perched too low on his nose and a thermos of coffee in his coat pocket. Today, the shelves were the same, the corners dusty, the desk lamps dim, but in the farthest row, near the family deed section, I found the record book he used to log in under our surname, Reyes, property, medical, financial. It was tucked between entries, wrapped in waxed paper and labeled in Grandpa's handwriting, Marguerite, for when they pretend she never mattered. I took a sharp breath. My fingers shook as I lifted the paper and the binder underneath it. Marguerite. My aunt, who hadn't been invited to a holiday dinner in over a decade, the one they called too soft, too poor, too bitter. She was the one he gave this to. I called her from the library stairwell, my voice steady. Odalyn? She asked, cautious. They told me you'd forgotten me too. I remembered you, I said. Can we talk? We met that afternoon in a booth at Maritza's cafe. She wore the same navy peacoat from years ago, only now the buttons were loose and the shoulders slightly sunken. But her eyes were still fire. She didn't waste time. Set a small locked binder on the table between us. Your grandfather gave me this the week before he passed, she said softly. Said to give it only to the one who comes asking the right question. She slid it across. I opened it. Inside was the unaltered version of the trust, my name clearly marked as the primary inheritor, Grandpa's signature at the bottom, and a post-it in his handwriting. This is who carried me when they didn't show up. Below it, folded receipts from the hospital, wire transfers. The charges were paid not by my parents, not by Selene, but by me. I remembered that night, emptying my savings, calling from my studio apartment, telling the hospital billing desk, yes, charge it to this card. No, I don't need a thank you. Back then, I didn't do it for thanks. Now, I finally knew he saw it. There was a letter, too, folded into thirds, brittle at the edges. To Odalyn, they'll say you're difficult, they'll say you're wrong. But I knew which one of you stayed. Hold the line, girl. The truth lives in quiet hands. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. Instead, I looked up at Marguerite. She nodded once. "Go get them," she said. By sunset, I was at my desk again, this time with intention. I opened my laptop, pulled up my affidavit template, and began typing. Each line was a record, a timestamp, a truth that had been buried but never erased. By the time the affidavit was 10 pages deep, I had attached every supporting file: notarization discrepancies, transfer logs, signature overlays, all labeled, all dated. I included screenshots of the metadata Miriam had helped me uncover. I added a final paragraph detailing the intimidation tactics, the forged cease and desist, the slap in court, Celine's break-in. My last sentence read, "This affidavit is submitted without threat, coercion, or expectation, only with the belief that truth deserves air." And then I made the call. The state ethics office. "Ma'am," the voice on the line asked, "are you prepared for what comes next?" "Yes," I said. I was born into it. The next step was purely mechanical. I uploaded the affidavit to the court's secure drop, selected Confidential Judicial Review. Then I scheduled 3 deliveries, one for the probate judge, one for the Ethics Review Board, and one for Nolan's own law office, all to arrive at exactly 8 a.m. As I sealed the last copy in an envelope and placed it by the door, I opened my phone. On the local news app, there was a gala livestream already playing, Nolan and Celine arm in arm, smiling before a banner that read, "Reyes Foundation for Legacy Growth." They posed, laughed, waved. Photographers snapped away. They looked like royalty, but royalty built on rot never holds. I turned off the phone, walked to my kitchen, poured a glass of water with steady hands. They'd smile tonight, but morning was coming, and I was bringing the light. The sun hadn't cleared the courthouse roof yet, but the parking lot was already crawling with movement, lawyers arriving in pressed suits, local reporters in quiet clusters, and a low buzz that didn't match the usual hush of probate proceedings. I walked in without a crowd, without an entourage, just me, and the sealed truth I'd already handed over 12 hours earlier. The real show had already started. At exactly 8 a.m., Clerk Monroe opened the sealed submission file in the court's document management system. The courtroom screen flickered once, then filled with my affidavit, time-stamped, watermarked, and backed by state encryption. Nothing screamed, nothing announced itself. It just appeared, like the truth does when it's ready to speak. I didn't need to say a word. My file had already done the talking. Across the aisle, I caught Celine mid-conversation with her counsel, unaware of what was coming. Nolan sat behind her, cool as ever, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. The judge entered. "Docket 1A, Reyes Estate Dispute. We've received an overnight affidavit with substantial attachments and a notarized statement from Ms. Odalyn Reyes." Celine froze, the color draining from her face like water circling a drain. Her attorney whispered something, scrolled rapidly through a tablet, then paused. "Your Honor, we object to the inclusion of—" "You're late," Judge Cortez cut in, firm. "This was submitted under verified identity and under oath. The content meets preliminary evidence thresholds. Your objection is noted and overruled." Celine's mouth dropped open. She turned in her seat, glaring at me like I'd committed some ancient betrayal. I didn't flinch. The judge continued. "Effective immediately, we are issuing a temporary freeze on all disbursements associated with the contested will of Luis Reyes. The court acknowledges the affidavit's inclusion of multiple inconsistencies, including metadata manipulation and financial coercion." Gasps rose behind us. Someone from the Charleston Chronicle scribbled into a notebook. Another clicked a photo from the press row. Celine stood up, actually stood. "This is a circus," she hissed. "You really believe some pathetic upload over actual family? Over me?" Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve. "Sit down." But she wasn't done. She always wanted to be the victim. She's doing this because Grandpa never trusted her. Everyone knows she was a burden. The judge didn't blink. "Counselor, if your client can't remain composed, I'll hold her in contempt." Nolan leaned forward now, whispering something in her ear. She jerked away. Don't you dare pretend this isn't your mess too." The cracks weren't just showing, they were splitting. Then came the final blow. Judge Cortez peered down at Celine's team. "Can you confirm how the most recent amended will, submitted by your office, was notarized?" There was a pause, a long one. Finally, a junior attorney, probably not older than 26, cleared her throat. "It was emailed in, a scanned copy." "Was it witnessed in person?" No answer. The silence said everything. "I'm ordering an immediate audit and investigation," the judge ruled. "Until we verify this will's legitimacy, it will not govern any estate action." And just like that, the courtroom shifted. Gasps turned into scribbles. Some in the gallery smiled. Others murmured. Celine looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Then the judge turned to me. "Ms. Reyes, would you like to make a statement?" I rose slowly. My knees weren't shaking. My voice wasn't caught. I pulled the folded note from my coat, the one Grandpa had written and Marguerite had kept safe all this time. I opened it and read aloud. "If they ever silence you, speak here. The truth will know your voice." That was all. I sat down. My heart was steady, my breath calm. The court clerk recorded the statement, and Judge Cortez gave one last glance across the room before calling the session into recess. Celine didn't look back at me when she left. Nolan did. He looked like a man who realized too late that he'd bet everything on silence, but I wasn't the quiet one anymore. It had been 4 weeks since the courtroom went still and their masks fell. Since then, I hadn't heard from my mother, or Elowen, or even Celine. The silence from that side of the family tree wasn't new, but this time, it was hollow, not heavy. What I did receive was an envelope from Attorney Hughes. Inside, one crisp sheet bearing the final court ruling. "The contested will is declared void. The previous trust is reinstated. Odalyn Reyes named as sole beneficiary per original document. No fanfare, no formal apology, no televised confession of guilt, just a printed judgment." The same afternoon, a second envelope came. No return address, no handwriting on the front, just a generic card tucked inside, a watercolor of mountain pines. Inside, in printed type, it read, "Sorry for everything. They never should have dragged you in." No signature, but I didn't need one. It smelled like Nolan's cologne. Sandalwood and silence. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. Instead, I folded the card in half and placed it in the same tin where Grandpa had once stored his checkbooks, next to the hair clip and the diner napkin. Keepsakes of a war that looked quiet but cut deep. Later that week, I returned to the old house. My house now, legally speaking. The lock was the same. The light still flickered in the hallway if you didn't hit it just right. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the week he passed. Dust hugged every corner. The air smelled of dry wood and lemon oil. It was like time had paused here, waiting for someone brave enough to press play again. I wandered into the kitchen, running my fingers along the counter I once sat under as a child, hiding from Celine after she'd yelled about spilled paint or broken buttons. My foot bumped something near the lower cabinet. When I crouched down, I found it wedged in the dark space between the back panel and the wall, a thin envelope, yellowed at the edges. No stamp, no date. It wasn't addressed to me. The name written across the front was Celine's. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor, opened it gently. His handwriting was as sharp and familiar as ever. "Celine," it began, "you always knew how to get what you wanted. I admired that about you, but I also worried, because sometimes you use that gift to take, not protect, especially from her. I wish you'd seen her as more than a shadow to step over. She's your sister. She always was. And if she ever comes back here, don't shut her out again. She was never invisible. You just stopped looking." I folded it back and stared at the ceiling. No tears came, just a quiet ache, the kind that didn't scream, but settled deep behind the ribs. I left the house without taking anything but that letter. Outside, the sky hung low, soft and overcast. The kind of weather that reminded you the world keeps turning, even when your family falls apart. I crossed the street to the old neighbor's porch. Mrs. Delgado was out watering her violets. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Odalyn Reyes," she said like it was both question and memory. "You're the quiet one, the one he trusted." I smiled. "Still am." She invited me in. We sat over black coffee and crumbly lemon bars. "He loved you, you know," she said. "Always said you listened when no one else did." Before I left, she disappeared into her hall closet and came back with a dusty cloth-wrapped book. "He dropped this off with me years ago. Told me to give it to you. Someday." I took it home and opened it in my lap that night. Inside was a journal. Not the kind people write secrets in, but the kind they use to remember. Lists of birthdays, scribbled grocery reminders, and halfway through, a folded sketch. A little girl sitting cross-legged on a porch step, hair wild, mouth mid-laugh, pencil lines faded but firm. He had drawn me. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The next morning, I contacted a local nonprofit legal aid center. I signed over half the estate in Grandpa's name, earmarked for women in contested inheritance cases. The rest? I kept. Not to live rich, not for revenge. I kept the house, not to forget, but to restore, room by room. Not as a monument to grief, but as a quiet place for someone else to start over. I stood on the porch at dusk a few nights later, watching the street breathe below me. And in the window's reflection, I didn't see the girl from court, or the daughter they slapped. I saw a woman who outlived their silence. I never got their apology. But I got something better, proof I was never the problem.